Hi, this is Mike making my video. It's 4/25/2025 and it's 9 o'clock p.m. So anyway, I'm making this video talking about how everything's meaningless and manifestation and what it truly is. And basically the human condition. But it's everything is kind of meaningless if you think about it. I've seen people in the afterlife disappear, spirits. Uh, you know, and there's that. So that tells me that the afterlife is temporary, and the odds of being blotted out are phenomenally high. And there's that, and then there's the fact that when you're in the flesh, you can get blotted out as well, and probably not even see the afterlife. So, with that being said, I think, everything's temporary, and it talks about this heaven and the one above it passing away. They no longer exist as separate states, but then again, they're also talking about how each state of being passes away. So, with that being said, like I've said, I've seen spirits, and more or less touched them and they disappeared. More or less, I put more force into it, but there's a person that attacked me and tried to kill me, and I seen him in the spirit world, and I pretty much blotted him out. Took very little effort, and he was a ghost, and he disappeared. And I've done that with other people. I shook their hand and they disappeared and stuff like that, because my will was such that, I wanted them to disappear, more or less, subconsciously, and they did. And, I've destroyed buildings, by making them disappear, and all the inhabitants in that building, and, not to mention all the other paranormal things I've done. But, needless to say, it was done. So anyway, yeah, it tells me that there's that, and then there's, the meaningless of everything, like how the alignment of this earth is perfect, and the distance from the sun, and the amount of black energy and or matter, and this and that and this and that, and just how rare it is. The small percentage of planets that are in the Goldilocks zone is astronomically low. And we're saying, if you think about it, all the planets in the universe, how many support life, and it's just such a small amount that life itself is an accident. It's an aberration, and things just happen to be in the right alignment and the right timing, where I don't think there was a creator. The light established itself, and they're meaning, they're saying that Jesus, when he said that, the light established itself, and it's almost like the parameters were set, based on the creation of this universe and the planets and everything else, and it was just such a small freak accident that human life and life in general was just created. So there's life. Two-dimensional beings have life too, and I've seen that, and they talk about glitches in the matrix, and they say that's error correcting code, and basically what happens, those are errors, and they slip through the cracks, and they express themselves as errors, and those are glitches in the matrix. So it's like errors in a computer program. So it's more or less that everything exists on the inside of my head, but then again, things exist outwardly as well, but they both exist. Like the ocean is a reflection of the sky, let's say the sky is a human mind, and the human condition in the world around it, is the ocean. So I mean, one reflects the other one, and it, one is no greater than the other. As above, so below. As within, so without. Um, a slave is never greater than his master. The master being the subconscious mind that gets enacted in when you meditate and you still your mind and you empty your thoughts and you still yourself and you don't move. You be still and stuff like that, and then when you focus and you have patience and stuff like that, and of course when your energies are high, then you can actually manipulate and change the outward appearance of things. So it's like you put your body to sleep. You fast from the world, you fast from food, you deny the flesh, still your mind, and then focus, and then of course raise your energies and all that. And then basically what you do is you actually change things by observing them. So all that basically is stuff that are programs that take place in the human mind. And when you have prepared soil, when your mind is ready, it receives information, and that information changes the way you look at things. It changes the way you see things. It changes the way you understand things. So it's kind of like, they say a wise farmer, a prudent farmer, sold everything he had and he bought a fine pearl. Or he worked the field and he found a treasure. He struggled. And that field could be a woman's body and they find the pearl in there, but it also could be the human mind. You work your mind and you work the field, and then you find a hidden treasure, the pineal gland. You make your eyes into an eye. So, with that being said, though, I mean, everything's an accident. It's just a rarity. We won the lottery. It's like you won the lottery, and you made it to this point, of creation. And then you got to consider how difficult it is just to make it to 55. It's nearly impossible. And you got to figure all the trials and tribulations that you go through. And, the things, the hurdles that you have to jump over. And all the struggling and strife that you have to go through. And then you finally get to the point where you discover that, it's all an illusion, a powerful delusion, it's a simulation, created by your mind. And, I had instances where I was in a room and across the hall there was a room, and as soon as I looked away from the room where it was just barely visible, I saw a gray film cover the window, and that tells me like an overexposed picture. So it's like Schrodinger's cat, the contents of that room, everything in it was non-existent until I turned my head just far enough where I could look in there and see it, and then the gray film would disappear. And that's really what it is. It's like I'm wearing goggles and I'm looking around. I got a headset on, and that's exactly what my eyes are. And then they send impulses to my brain, and then I can see things, but that those things are generated by my mind. And then also I had dreams about Pixar cartoons, and then I woke up and my dog appeared as a Pixar cartoon. It's like the dog just came into existence and I seen it, and then as it was developing, it went from a Pixar cartoon to a real dog within a millisecond. So, that told me that we are just basically Pixar cartoons that have been run through another process and we look more real. Things like that. And then, of course, we're just wearing a spacesuit, and we got the goggles on. Everything I touch, feels real, but it's just all it is, electrical impulses. It's like I got the gloves on and I got the helmet on. So, you think about all that, and then you think about who created it, and it's like, it's like the light established itself. It's like, who created me? You know, I was a little blob of sperm and egg and all that, you know, microscopic particles that came together, and then, you know, 55 years later it grew into something like this. Grow a tiny little seed that grows into a giant tree, you know, like me. So, you know, you think about it, you know, it's really all I am is just a pile of meat that a pile of food, you know, dirt and food and all that. And, you know, I got impressions in my mind, and I'm an animated piece of dirt. So, or a pile, an animated dung heap with watered down salt dumped on it. So, you know, that's really, if you think about it, I mean, it's pretty short-sighted to say it that way, but I mean, if you think about it, you know, it's really all we are. In the end of the day, you know, we're just basically an existence that was an accident, you know, that just, you know, through whatever chances or channels, you know, it was just a rarity. But I've seen it, you know, like heaven and earth, you know, they both disappear. And the reason being is my awareness of those states of being are no longer present in at times, and that being in the flesh or in the spirit, you know, either way, they disappear. And so anyway, there's that, and then there's, you know, you think about it, the sun burns out, you know, the coastlines disappear, people die, animals die, fish die, trees die, things rot, they decay, they have entropy. And you think about pain, you know, it's like pain is a positive thing, it's measurable, but pleasure is just a release of pain, you know, so it's an absence of pain, so you have less pain. And that's really ultimately what's the human condition's all about, is you're trying to run away from pain and suffering. And this world is known for having a lot of suffering, but, you know, and having a lot of confusion, and we're the only species that can truly give anything meaning. You know, so when we give something meaning, you know, like a goldfish has a birth certificate or whatever, you know, it doesn't mean that it's any more prominent, but because of its title, you know, it's made more prominent. So you have a funeral for it and flush it down the toilet. Or, you know, in learning too, the past, all the decisions you made in the past make up what your future is, this present moment of now. But the past no longer exists, and, you know, the future isn't even here. So it's like you're in this moment of now. And even these words, when you hear them, those are from the past. So, you know, it's just the present moment. And then you got to figure that's when all the magic happens. But, you know, you put too much of an emphasis, too, on miracles. I mean, miracles are nice, don't get me wrong. They answer a lot of problems for you, but, you know, they're fleeting, and even that is a fleeting thing. You know, a miracle happens in an instant, and then when it does, the holy instant, it expresses itself, it blows your mind, it changes the way you see things. But once it happens, you know, it doesn't necessarily happen again. I'm not saying it doesn't, but, you know, there is deja vu, but it's a very difficult thing to do. And, you know, when you get into the point where you enter into these realms, you know, sometimes you get kicked out, and that's because you've exhausted everything and you've done everything, and there's no longer any purpose for you to be there. So, you know, I just live a simple life, I do simple things, and I'm content with everything. It's like a low level of happiness, and being content is actually one of the most powerful things you can do in life. So anyway, that's all I got to say.